Hey YouTube, Rico Knows here. I'm going to talk to you guys about the NFL draft. I'm talking about the Detroit Lions in this video. First and foremost, full disclosure, these are not my grades on these picks. I went and did a quick Google search online. I found a picture or a graphic with everybody on it, and that's what I'm using for reference. I don't know who made this graphic. I don't know who gave out these grades. Please don't judge me or assume I did, because that's not true. Okay, I'm just doing this here. If you weren't aware, I'm breaking down every single draft pick, every single player taken in the NFL draft. I do this every year. This is the third year of me doing this. If you want to see all the other assessments, you go to YouTube, go to the homepage, click on the playlist tab, and you can see all the other assessments for the 2025 NFL draft reviews and assessments. Another thing, if you want to see draft rankings videos, you want to see the live podcast I did before the draft and what I had to say about these players in depth, because I talked about every draft eligible player essentially, you just click on the live tab there, okay, and you can see all the other videos and stuff like that. But back to the Detroit Lions and who they drafted. I'm going to talk about them, and I think there was an emphasis here, and the emphasis here was continue to draft players that improve our culture. You know, as a senior leader in the military, I took over some units that, well, I'm a retired first sergeant, served over 21 years in the Army, and I would be put in charge of certain units, and I would get this back brief on how my unit was before I got there. And the hardest thing to do is change culture. Now, you can come up with rules, you can come up with standards, but if they have a losing culture or a substandard culture, it's really hard to overcome that unless you have genuine change and buy-in. I think the Lions have had a significant amount of change and buy-in from an organization standpoint, and it's showing, right? They're picking 28th in the first round. They're having good seasons. They're playing well, and they love their coach. They love their direction and where they're going, and I think this draft reflects that. Now, I don't think all the draft picks were slam dunks. I don't think... And I never feel this way, right? I think last year I have a problem with draft picks all the time. We're all different. There's 32 different GMs. I can't pretend to agree with everything one GM did. Now, I'm talking to the fan bases. I'd imagine people who watch this video or people who watch the NFL draft reviews, they're not just casual people who said, I want to learn more about draft picks today. No, they're typically fanatical fans. Well, fan, that's redundant. Fan is derived from the word fanatic. But they're fanatical Detroit Lions people who just watch the videos and are going to lose their mind if I say anything negative about the players. Trust me, I get this from every fan base in every video. And the truth is, you can go back and look at your team's draft picks over the last 10, 20 years. Pull up any draft class you want, and I promise you, you won't recognize 4 of the guys' names. I promise you, at a minimum. And many of them won't work out. It's just the reality of the NFL draft. There are misses, and there are people that won't work out. And it's my job to just come out here, give my assessment. I've been following these players for the majority of their careers. I can tell you about them in depth, and I'll try my best to give you an assessment of how I think they're going to do in the NFL. But the reality is I don't know about injuries. I don't know about coaching changes. I don't know about scheme and what's going to impact them in the near future or over the course of their career. So you might think you have all the answers right now. You don't, and neither do I. But if you don't agree with me, you don't have to let me know in the comments. Just go make another video and see if anybody agrees with you. Like, that's all I ever did, right? Just make a video and see if anybody's rocking with you. Just record it and put it out there. And if nobody watches it and no one agrees with you, maybe your information is invalid. Maybe what you're saying doesn't really matter. That's all I ever did. I got an iPhone recording me right now. I got a $200 4K webcam from Best Buy recording me right now. That's how I did it. Good luck with that. Anyways, let's talk about these picks. Tyleik Williams, if you're watching the pre-draft content before the NFL draft, you saw the pro day for Ohio State. Tyleik Williams takes a tumble in the 40-yard dash. Good thing for him. 330-pound defensive tackles don't run 40-yard dashes all that often in a game. When he fell, I went straight to Twitter and I said, guess what? He's not falling out of the third round. I don't care if he fell at his pro day. He's not falling out of the third round no matter what. Well, it turns out the Lions were sitting there licking their chops and saying, we're going to take him in the first round. No one gave him a first-round grade, no one in the world, and no one evaluated him this way. Now, pre-draft, my draft rankings, I can show them to you. I'll pull them up for you if you don't want to watch the episodes and hear me talk about it. But pre-draft rankings, defensive tackle, Tyleik Williams was number 3 on my favorite defensive tackles list. Not top 10. He was nowhere in my top 10. This is a little more important. When I put people in my favorites list, that means I see certain traits on tape that I would love to have in my locker room, that I would love to have in my organization, that I would invest millions of dollars in. These guys up here, I think, are hard workers, blue-collar guys, people that improve the culture of your team, I'm saying they work hard in the weight room, film room, all that stuff. And I was thinking about this, this factual thing with Tyreek Williams is, like, you watch players and they only play on the field for about 30 minutes in every game, whether it's offense or defense. The game's an hour long, 30 minutes of film. And in the NFL, that'll be 17 weeks. So 17, 30 times. 30 minutes, 17 times, excuse me. And that's it. That's all you see him for 1 year. That's it. It's about 8.5 hours. 8.5 hours of gameplay is what you see from every single player, if they're starters. And that's how you judge whether or not they're all-time greats, over those 8.5 hours. So what I'm trying to get across to you is that in preparation for those 8.5 hours, they probably put in 2,000 plus hours in preparation of weightlifting, watching film, getting bigger, faster, stronger, whatever it is. So when you look at a professional athlete, you have to value those 2,000 hours of preparation versus the 8.5 you guys see on TV. Now, a lot of people are infatuated with the 8.5. A lot of people only care how you perform in the game. But if you want to change the culture of an organization, you have to start putting a lot more value into those 2,000 hours. That's across the board. That could be in college, high school, or in the NFL. So with that being said, I think the Detroit Lions found players that put in work, that have earned their stripes and worked their way to the top. And that's every single one of these draft picks, with the exception of Dominic Levitt. But that's a whole other story. But every single one of these guys, you can just see grind, blue-collar grind. And I love it. So Tyreek Williams, although it was a reach, I hate that 5 defensive tackles went off the board in the first round. Drafting defensive tackles like they're quarterbacks is absurd. Okay, and the reality is of the defensive tackles, I only gave 2 first-round grades. But when you start seeing them go off the board like hotcakes, like everybody's just taking one, well, you got to jump in and get what you need. And I think the talent disparity from 28 to 57, you would have had a huge drop-off at defensive tackles. So they had to make the best of what they found. Do I think they were all first-round draft picks? No. Derek Harmon's not a first-round talent. Tyreek Williams isn't a first-round talent. But you took him in the first round, he's a good player. And that's that. And he fits a need, and he fits a culture. And that's probably more important than a lot of these other things, right? A lot of you guys want to date Instagram models. But you can't. They're not all first-round picks. They're not franchise players. No, that housewife, that school teacher, the one that likes you back, the one that's loyal and committed, that's probably the one you want to be with. That's probably the one that improves your culture and your locker room the best. I'm just saying. So pick and choose the right people. Get in relationships with the right people. And Tyreek Williams is one of the right guys. I think he's a pretty good player. And I think he's got the right mindset and preparation. I know he's a film junkie. It's good stuff, man. I like the guy. Second round, A-plus pick. Now, remember, I told you, I don't agree with any of these grades on the far left. I didn't make the grades, but this is an A-plus pick. Tate Ratledge going 57th overall. Tate Ratledge, pre-draft evaluation I did on Tate Ratledge. I was watching film on Tate, and you look here at offensive guards. There's Tate Ratledge just ahead of his teammate Dylan Fairchild. Now, both of these guys started at guard for Georgia. I turn on the tape. I'm watching both guards because I'm doing an evaluation for all draft-eligible players. So I'm watching both of them. There was such a difference in talent and athleticism that I wrote, Tate Ratledge, dog. Dylan Fairchild, he's a bulldozer. He's a grinder. He's cool. He's been starting 3 years at Georgia. That's fine. But there was a gap here in ability between the two of these guys, athleticism-wise. But they still ended up 6'7". Am I supposed to say that? Or the kids say, you guys probably don't know. You're not supposed to say that. 6'7". You're not supposed to say that together. I don't know why. I was talking the other day, and I said 6'7". My kids freaked out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6'7". That was 5'6". Okay, my bad. Tate Ratledge, Dylan Fairchild. And Tate Ratledge is much better. So I thought it was an incredible pick. Shout out to the Lions for getting Tate Ratledge. Dude's a dog. I think it's the best pick in the draft for them. I really do. I think he's a future starter. Absolute beast, and they did amazing things. Very good pick. Next pick, Isaac Tisla. I've had 3 years, 2 years really. 2 years, I've had every single opportunity over the last 2 years to say something glowingly positive about Isaac Tisla. This is a kid who used to play at Hillsdale, Division II school, transferred up to Arkansas. I'm obviously a small school guy. I advocate for small school guys. I go out there and I put all the tape work in, and I talk about them on Twitter, and I do all this stuff. And you've never once heard me say something positive about Isaac TeSlaa. Never once heard me gas him, say this is the future, this guy's awesome. He's obviously worked really hard going from Division II to the SEC and now the NFL. So he's probably got that chip on his shoulder. And all these guys have that in common, a chip on their shoulder. He's a big wide receiver guy, but I'm not drafting him at this point. 3rd round, 70th overall pick. This is a terrible pick. A C+ my ass, bro. This is C+ from a Lions fan. This is a terrible pick. I'm looking at who's still on the board at the time. Savion Williams, Ty Felton, Pat Bryant. These are all much better wide receivers. As a matter of fact, if Isaac TeSlaa was on any of those teams, he's on the bench and can't start over those players. So to pick him in the NFL draft over those players, I think it's silly. I think it's a terrible pick. Obviously, the Lions wanted somebody that was big and not one of the smaller slot receivers. I get that. But you didn't need to take him right here. Nah, there's no way in hell. There's none. Now, going into this draft, the Lions knew they were going to draft a guard, and they evaluated guards heavily. I think they rack and stacked all the guards. They went and evaluated all the guards, and they said, yo, this is our pick right here. We're going to go 2nd round, Tate Ratledge at guard. And then they had the board. And then it was time for them to make a pick because they didn't have one in the 4th round. So now we're at the 5th round. They're 100 picks later from Isaac TeSlaa. 100 players have gone off the board. And they're about to make a pick. They don't need a guard anymore. They already got one in Tate Ratledge. But when they're looking at the draft, they say, holy shit, Miles Frazier's still here. Miles Frazier is still here. This is a guy that I evaluated. Go back and watch my rankings again. My guards, right behind Dylan Fairchild, was Miles Frazier. A phenomenal player at LSU, a quality starter for many years, and he can play all across that offensive line. Versatility out of this world. Dwight Howard-like versatility. And there he is, bro. What an incredible draft pick. So, for me, whoever made this graphic, they understand that is a great pick, especially in the 5th round. Really is. I love that pick. Shout out to Miles Frazier. Yep. Shout out to the LSU offensive line. Getting all kinds of guys drafted. Really good stuff. But I thought that pick was so much better, and it was 100 picks after the Isaac TeSlaa debacle. But don't get it twisted. TeSlaa will get reps because he's a 3rd-round draft pick. They're going to put him in the 2 deep. They're going to get him reps, and people are going to write to me and go, Rico, you're so wrong. Look, he had 3 catches yesterday, and it doesn't matter. He's not better than the players that were drafted after him. That's what matters. Whether you have to play these players or not doesn't matter to me. Right? I think last year I talked about the 49ers, and I said, they drafted a bunch of non-starters. Just a bunch of guys who can't start in the NFL is what I said. And then I started getting messages left and right about how all these guys are starting for the 49ers. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, I know they're starting. What's the record? What's the 49ers record? How many games they win last year? You know why? Because they're starting non-football players. Okay? So, yes, Lions fans, Isaac TeSlaa is going to see the field. That is not a good thing. You have to use him. You draft him in the 3rd round. It's not a good thing. I don't think he's a good football player. All right, in the 6th round, Hamed Hassanin. Hamed Hassanin, one of these sack artists that I really believe in. Shout out to him. I was watching tape on him before the season last year, and he had a bunch of sacks. He was a sack master in the group of 5. And I have over here, I had this roster where I was looking at Boise State players, and I remember I wrote a note next to Hassanin. And the note was sack master is what I wrote, sack master. And then I was going to just shut off the tape, and I kept watching it. And there's another kid, Jaden Virgin Morgan, I believe is his name, a hyphenated name. Holy smokes, is he amazing. And he'll be a household name next draft or whenever it's time to draft players. Trust. Hyphenated kid at Boise State. Long story short. Okay, so here we go. Hamed Hassanin coming over from Cairo, Egypt. He's the first Egyptian player ever. Another guy with a chip on his shoulder. Just a hard-nosed kid. And when you watch his interviews, I saw an interview of him online, and he said, I'll die for Coach Campbell. Like, I'll die for him. I'm ready to run through a wall for him. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for soldiers. You're looking for people who want to win wars, right? So you're like, I could go, 100 guys versus a gorilla? You want 100 Hamed Hassanins, and that gorilla's in trouble. That's how good he is. I like that kid. Situational pass rusher. Obviously going to have to get developed to the NFL. Hasn't reached his ceiling yet. Just a hard-nosed kid. And earned everything he has. Okay, earned everything he has. And it's probably cliche because everybody's earned everything they have. But he really has. Dan Jackson. Speaking of earned everything you have. Dan Jackson. No, he's probably not a great professional player. I get that. But if you want to keep that theme going of drafting blue-collar, hard-nosed kids who just earned everything, Dan Jackson's that dude. Dan Jackson, the second Georgia player they drafted? They drafted 3 Georgia players. But he's a Georgia defensive back. If you want to know a fun fact about Dan Jackson, he's not a preferred walk-on. Dan Jackson is a full-blown walk-on. Like, he went to Georgia and showed up to the walk-on tryouts and made the team. Not preferred walk-on. He showed up. They said, hey, we're having tryouts tomorrow in the quad. We're going streaking in the quad. Shout out to Old School. Dan Jackson showed up and earned his spot onto the team, and I'll take it a step further. You're playing and you're training with some of the 4- and 5-star players at every position group. And Dan Jackson, took him 6 years, but he eventually became a starter at Georgia. Found himself in the 2 deep at Georgia after being a walk-on. That mentality, that's what you want to find. That's what you want to get. Now, you didn't have to draft him. Nobody was going to draft him. You didn't have to draft him. He's a 7th-round pick. It doesn't matter. But you didn't have to draft him. That's silly. You could have got him as an undrafted free agent. And they got some great undrafted free agents. They really did. Some guys that I'm excited about. And I'll talk about them after this in the 8th round, right? 8th round. And then the next pick is Dominic Lovett. Now, Dominic Lovett, shout out to him. He's not like rah-rah. He didn't get arrested or anything. But, excuse me one second. I didn't know I was going to pull it up, so I'm going to actually pull up a list for you guys here in a second. But this is a young man who started his career at Missouri, went out and did some great things. I think he's a nice little slot receiver. Doesn't bring a lot of value to me in special teams and stuff like that, so I don't know how he really has an impact on the team. But I can tell you this. I think he's better than Isaac TeSlaa, and he was taking the last pick in the whole draft for them. So I think he's good. I think he's a good football player. Went to a room now. All those Georgia fans better understand. You don't have great NFL pedigree at wide receiver. You just never have. And you brought in a transfer, and he dominated that room. But it is what it is. I'm more excited about some of the undrafted free agents. So I'm going to talk about them now. I'm going to pull them up for you guys. First one is Prescorn. Caden Prescorn coming over from Ole Miss, really from Memphis. But that's the good tight end, very athletic. I hope he makes the team. Mason Miller, a former All-American at North Dakota State. Complete stud. Really like his versatility on the offensive line. That's a good guy. I don't think Kai Robichaux is very good. I don't. It just doesn't move me like that. Anthony Tyus, on tape, looks slow. This is a Northwestern transfer. Played at Ohio last year, but very effective. I don't know if that's Tim Albin, the former head coach who's now at Charlotte, the former head coach finding ways to make it happen. But when it's hard to tell how good running backs are when they play in the MAC, because even like a guy like Say Bangora rushes for 1,000 yards while at Ohio. And then he transfers to Minnesota, and he's 4th string. So it's like, man, how good are these players? So Anthony Tyus, very effective, him and Parker Navarro while at Ohio last year. But I don't know if he's good enough to make it in the NFL. It is what it is. UMass, Jacoby never stuck out to me. Zach Horton never stuck out to me, and he played a long time, moved over from JMU to Indiana. Ian's good. Another Division II guy, just like TeSlaa, coming over from Grand Valley State. Shout out to the GLIAC. The GLIAC. He's played a lot of football. 49 games. And speaking of playing a lot of football, there's your boy, Fatanu, Arizona State center. Nobody's played more football than that guy. Nobody. Started 47 consecutive games. They didn't draft a lot of centers in this draft. Nobody did. Nobody drafted any centers. He could play some football. Okay? And then the last guy I'll talk about is Gavin Holmes. Gavin Holmes, another hardworking kid. When he transferred from Wake Forest to Texas, you start reading all the reports out of Texas for spring football, and they're saying Gavin Holmes is one of the best defensive backs out there. Unfortunately, it never really came to fruition on Saturdays, but Gavin Holmes, what that tells me is he practices really well. Yeah, he works really hard in practice, and he shines when given opportunities in practice. Now, for whatever reason in the games, they went with some other guys. They transferred in McCubba. They transferred in some other corners and defensive backs, and they made it happen without him. But I still think Gavin Holmes is a good football player. I do. And I think he's a hell of a player, actually. So good players here and there. I'm excited for Prescorn and Gavin Holmes to try to make it on the team. But for me, the Lions draft was getting a bunch of blue-collar guys, and I like that. I like the fact that they're just kind of building upon what they've been doing for the last couple of years. There's nothing wrong with this draft. You're not going to make it on the Detroit Lions if you don't work hard. No, if you don't have that DNA, you're not going to make it. Your friends don't know, but Rico knows. Peace, y'all. See you in the next video.